Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 13 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Christina Hagen, coming to you live from Cape Town. We now have well over 150 episodes recorded and available on YouTube. So if you miss out because of load shedding or your Tuesday nights have become busy, never fear, you can always catch up later. We are, of course, on all major social media channels, and you can use the hashtag Conservation Conversations to let us know what you think of the show. We aim to keep these webinars free for all to learn and enjoy, so if you do enjoy the series and can contribute no matter how small an amount, please do consider donating. We have now included functionality on our website to donate directly through the BirdLife South Africa webpage. So you can access that by scanning the QR code on the screen now, or you can visit the link on the screen. If you would rather do an EFT, you can also do that. You can EFT BirdLife directly and use the reference webinars and your name so we can track the donations. And we are so grateful to those of you who do continue to support us. Linked to this, we are again running a donation competition where the prize is the ultimate companion to birding in Southern Africa. And we are very, very grateful to Peter and Irene Ginn for donating these fabulous books as prizes. If you donate at least 100 Rand, you'll be entered into the draw for one of these books. And for each multiple of 100 Rand that you donate, that will get you another entry. And so the competition is running until the end of July, so you have another couple of weeks to get those donations in, and I will announce the winner on the 6th of August. And unfortunately, due to postage costs, this competition is only for South Africans. But we are very grateful to those of you who have already donated and entered the competition. We are also running our annual BirdLife South Africa raffle. And this year, the prize is an amazing 8-day, 7-night birding trip for two to Brazil. And now this is a complete bucket list location for birding for me. So I hope some of our viewers will enter, and so I can live vicariously through you. So you can visit our website, birdlife.org.za/raffle, for more details and to enter. So tonight, as I mentioned, we are joined by a panel of speakers who will be sharing information about the Coordinated Avifaunal Road Counts, which is an incredible citizen science program that's been running for a number of years, as you will soon hear. So to introduce our speakers, tonight we are joined by 4 speakers. First up will be Cassie Carstens, who is the Secretary Bird Conservation Manager at BirdLife South Africa. When he's not running, he spends his time traveling around the country, monitoring secretary bird nests and studying for his MSc on this species. Next up is Donella Young, who was the coordinator for the CAR project while at the ADU, and she remains a true champion of the project. Christie Craig is the Conservation Research Analyst at the Endangered Wildlife Trust, and she has just completed her PhD on blue cranes and is developing a species conservation action plan for our national bird. And lastly is Alan Lee. He is the Science and Innovation Program Manager at BirdLife South Africa and has used CAR data to analyze the trends in encounters for species of conservation concern. So we look forward to all of your talks, and I'll invite Cassie to kick us off.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to present to you a niche project within the broader citizen science field of ornithology in South Africa. It's my privilege to start off and just give a brief introduction on the project and then hand over to my co-presenters, a true smorgasbord of epic individuals who has worked with this project for a number of years in various capacities. So we would like to encourage all of you during the course of this as well to consider taking it up. So keep that in mind. I will definitely share how you go about doing it. So just wait. Christina has done a wonderful job of introducing all of us, but let me just tell you what everyone will be covering. Donella, who's got the longest history with the project, will talk about her time at the Animal Demographic Unit at the University of Cape Town. Alan, who is our big, dark, black magic statistical guru, will tell you about how the car data is very, very important for ornithological research, specifically our red data book analyses, which we are currently working on. And Christie will share how car played a major part in her PhD, working on blue cranes. But let's start with the big family. I trust that you all are familiar at least with some of them, especially the one with the sunbird. The Southern African Bird Atlas Project is a project that's been running for a number of years, and most birders are familiar with it, and there's quite a lot of South African birders that contribute to it. It's the one that's very close to my heart, but it's not the only one in the family. There's 3 others, and they go from least known to hopefully better known after this evening's presentation. So let's talk about them quickly. I have only heard of the mythical beast called the Atlas of Seabirds at Sea. I've never done one, and I have read all the stories about it. Maybe if you come with us on Flock 2025 to Marion Island, there might be one taking place. So that's the most I know of atlasing seabirds at sea. The other 2, however, I'm a bit more familiar with. Coordinated avifaunal road counts and the coordinated waterbird counts. I'm specifically sure for that latter one, there was a lot of high fives when that name was handed out. Quack is just absolutely perfect. Let's deal with quack quickly. It mainly focuses on all the water bird species that occur in South Africa. It monitors population at a series of sites where the dams, rivers, estuaries, you name it, and it records movement information between those areas as well. The car, on the other hand, deals with density and abundance, and specifically as well, habitat selection. Both of those are biannual. I hope that's the right. My Afrikaans English translation isn't always the best, but takes place twice per year. The quack counts during the months of January and February for the summer count, and then during the month of July, in which we are now, for the winter count. And the car as well, the last weekend in January and the last weekend in July, which some of you will now nod knowingly that this specific presentation this evening is well timed as a method to whet your appetite to possibly take part later in the year. Of all those citizen science projects in South Africa, you can note that they cover various aspects of the birds in our country, and the data is used in different ways. But first, what is car? Car is a process where you go out with a bunch of friends in your car, you select a route. There are numerous ones across South Africa in all the provinces. There's a start point, there's an end point, there's a certain methodology that you need to follow. It's not that intricate. Basically, you drive, stop every now and then, you climb out, you look for some birds, and you keep score of what you're seeing on the papers, on the forms that you've printed out. That's basically it. It's afternoon, it's a morning's worth of bird watching in a car with friends. Like, what more can you ask for? The stopping is especially nice because, of course, you can take coffee with, and the weather does get quite a lot of fun during the winter months. I assume that everyone in Cape Town, or at least in the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape, and especially in the Drakensberg Mountains, might encounter these types of weather conditions later this month. So that's a car in a very, very short period of time. That was all that was allotted to me. I'll try and explain a little bit more later on. But let me end off before I pass on to Donella. The importance of this research. The species that I work on, secretary birds, is a widespread species in South Africa. Now, I can't be everywhere. Now, fortunately, the South African Bird Atlas Project is there to fill that gap where citizen scientists can record where the birds are seen, and I get a rough idea of the species' distribution. We can pull out a little bit of population density as well with the specific data that's recorded on SABAP, but with the car data, since it's a specific route that you drive, you count specific individuals along that route, you get a much better density count. And with the information that we've received from car, we are able to estimate much more accurately the number of secretary birds that occur in South Africa. Spoiler, we estimate between 8,000 and 10,000 of them in South Africa, not 8,000 to 10,000 individuals. So yes, that's the importance that we would like to reiterate tonight and encourage all of you to start taking part. But I think, Christina, back to you. Donella, your turn to talk about the history.
Yeah, thanks very much, Cassie. So Donella chose to pre-record her talk just in case there were any internet issues tonight. So I'll just start playing the video, and yeah, enjoy.
Thank you, Christina, Cassie, and BirdLife. I have so enjoyed the 16 years that I coordinated the CAR project, as past participants were always so willing to go out and count the birds on bumpy back roads. And I also had wonderful support from colleagues at the ADU. Thank you for this opportunity to greet you all and share the journey that CAR has been on. David Allen initiated the CAR project while he was doing his fieldwork for his masters on the Ludwig's bustard, the Denham's bustard, and the blue crane. And he devised the standardized method of driving slowly and stopping to count every 2 kilometers and getting out and scanning in all directions. He tells the story of once having a colleague who was doing road counts with him, and they were passing through Rivier-Sonderend, and his colleague said that he felt trapped in a road count, Sonderend, a road count without end. So David needed help with the road counts, and in July 1993, he involved the Cape Bird Club for the first time on counts in Overberg, and Sue Mayer actually coordinated the first few counts. Les Underhill, the director at the ADU, saw the potential of expanding the project, and Wendy Hitchcock was the first CAR coordinator, and I began coordinating the project at the end of 1993. This map shows you the footprint of the CAR routes within 7 provinces. And James Harrison was the projects manager of all the projects involving citizen scientists at the ADU. And I learned a huge amount from him. And one of the first tasks he gave me was to meet with bird clubs to start routes in the Eastern Cape. The Eastern Cape routes were initiated soon afterwards, and began counting in 1998. And as I mentioned, the routes started in the Overberg in 1993, and in the Swartland in 1995. Mark Anderson started the Karoo Large Terrestrial Bird Survey in 1995 while he was working for Nature Conservation. And then Brian Colohan started the routes in the Free State. He also worked for Nature Conservation, and eventually there were over 100 routes in the Free State. Tim Wood, who had a phenomenal knowledge of KwaZulu-Natal, met with Bird Club members, and they started routes in 1997. And then EWT and some bird clubs were involved in starting routes up in Mpumalanga, and Craig Whittington Jones, who worked for Nature Conservation, started initiating routes in 2004. So by January 2008, there were about 340 routes counted each count by 800 citizen scientists, and they altogether covered 19,000 kilometers, which is actually the flight distance from Cape Town to London. So it's an incredibly long way. And it's a huge thank you to all the precinct organizers. These are the blue squiggles are all routes, and clusters of routes were called precincts. And each precinct had an organizer who would phone all the route leaders before the count and check that they were available and had all their information. And as the project grew, it was very helpful for me to mainly be in contact with the precinct organizers, and then they would keep in touch with the route leaders. And the counts happened twice a year, on the last Saturday of January and the last Saturday of July. And it's important that all the counts take place on one day, because these big birds can fly large distances. The CAR working group was formed quite early on at James's suggestion, and we found that a very helpful group to refer to in deciding whether to add new species or other management developments. Initially, the first count, only the blue crane and the Denham's bustard were counted, but we soon added other species, especially as the project went up north. So all the crane species were counted, the 3 crane species. Most of the corehound species were counted, and the 3 bustard species. This is the Corrie bustard, the heaviest flying bird. And then some spectacular species like the ground hornbill, and secretary bird, and the sun-balled ibis. Early on, we were asked to count game birds in KwaZulu-Natal due to concern about their numbers. And then 10 years ago, we were asked to add a few low-flying raptors because of concern about declines, and also the corvids because of concern about increases. And we also counted birds like the black-headed heron, which are very prevalent in agricultural habitats. And early on, we were asked to count the black harrier, which is a very threatened species. It's particularly dependent on indigenous veld. There were 45 bird species that were counted altogether in the end, and of those, 19 are on the regional red list of threatened species. That was for the list in 2015. In the year 2000, there was only one species, the saddle-billed stork, that was endangered. And so now in 2015, there are 7 birds on the endangered list, and the red list is currently being updated. And the CAR data has been used extensively in assessing the species. Nearly half the routes are counted by local farmers, and the rest by bird club members, many conservationists, and a few schools. We tried to involve as many farmers as possible, as they have an ongoing presence in in the agricultural areas. Many of the precinct organisers were Bird Club members, and they played a key role in encouraging observers. So thank you to the many route leaders and the many observers who gave of their time and petrol, as petrol costs have kept rising, and their birding skills. And I was often surprised at how, and impressed at the perseverance of the CAR participants, who went to great lengths to complete their routes despite many obstacles. And I can remember one route leader who actually did a 120-kilometer detour to get to the other side of a flooded river. There were some different, what I would call spin-off gatherings. Barbara Forsyth, who organized the Christie's Mere counts, ran a bird ID course for this group of farm personnel and some children. And she managed to collect donated binoculars and field guides from the Wits Bird Club. And here you can, on the right, you can see the binoculars giving them new eyes and concern for the big birds on farms where they worked. As I mentioned, we did involve some schools, and we actually designed a shorter route in the Overberg for young primary school children. The principal, Jeffrey Harrison, is actually still counting to this day, although he's no longer teaching at that school. And Tiart, who counted a route in the Northern Cape, often took a group of young people with him. This is a group of mainly Cape Bird Club and Somerset West Club birders who gathered at the Caledon Botanical Gardens after completing their counts after the 20th count in the Overberg. That was in 2013. We found that it was really important to have information sheets about how to count, so that the counts were done in a standardized way, and how to design new routes and distinguishing bustards, and then of course the road count forms. And Mario Wren Sargent typeset all the project materials, as well as the farmer's booklet and car report, which I'll get to. Newsletters were sent out before each count, and I found communication and feedback was really vital to keep participants involved. I'd like to mention that actually in the early days of coordinating the project, there were actually only 5 people on email. And so a lot of the coordination was by phone or writing letters. And I posted all the road count forms and route maps and newsletters. And my children can remember sealing about 700 envelopes, each count in the middle, sort of 200s. Thankfully, by 2008, many people were on email and could receive the information by email. In 2012, Michael Brooks developed the online data capture system. And I'm very thankful that he's currently upgrading the system at the Percy Fitzpatrick Institute. Prior to this, Linda Tsieper and Denise Leach and a number of others captured the data at the ADU. And once we had a website, I was able to do some interim reports on the counts about a month or two after the counts. And there were precinct organizers who also sent out reports, and Brian Colohan, who retired about 5 years ago, is still sending out these reports. He coordinates these 3 precincts, and he had a visual way of presenting the results. And I was delighted when he sent me this photo of him climbing down a camelthorn tree after checking a vulture nest. And many of the precinct organizers would write articles for their local newspapers to increase awareness of all these threatened species and all the big birds on farms. We also designed a leaflet for farmers to hand out to farmers who inquired why participants were scanning their lands with binoculars, and this gave information about the project and also about bird-friendly management practices. In 2003, we were able to publish an 8-year report on the CAR project. James and I and many precinct organizers were involved in this report, particularly Brian Colohan and Mark Anderson, and Renee Navarro did all the analyses for this report, which was widely distributed to participants and to libraries and distributed by precinct organizers. The Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund gave us funding for a project called Big Birds on Farms, and James and I collaborated with many farmers and land care of the Department of Agriculture and other organizations. And James wrote up the desirable dozen measures to conserving biodiversity on farms. And thanks to land care, it was widely distributed to farmers in the Western Cape and also by precinct organizers to other parts of the country. So conserving biodiversity on farms has many challenges, and some of the points that James made were to connect patches of indigenous veld with corridors between those patches, to protect watercourses and floodplains, and not to grade rivers, and to monitor power lines and other dangerous structures. The information, all the data collected over the years, it's now 31 years, has been used in a number of research projects. Sally Hofmeyr did her PhD at the ADU, and she started it in 2008. And her analyses really highlighted the decline in the southern Black Kohan, in the Overberg region, and in the Swartland, and in the Little Karoo. This species is very dependent on indigenous veld. observers didn't only record the number of birds, they also recorded the habitat and actually also recorded the activity of certain species. And in this slide of Sally's, she looked at the use of habitat by the blue crane, and you can see that in the fynbos precincts, the blue cranes were mainly in fallow pasture or stubble fields, whereas in the non-fynbos precincts, they were mainly in veld, mainly in the grasslands. And we had a student visiting from overseas who designed some summaries, online summaries. And in this slide, you can see that it showed that the secretary bird was predominantly in indigenous veld. We also received many data requests over the years, mainly for environmental impact assessments for roads or wind and solar farms. And as I mentioned earlier, the data is used widely in assessing threatened species. And then there are numerous other, mainly conservation organizations that have used the information. And then there were many collaborations and partnerships with organizations. We're most grateful to BirdLife South Africa and to all the bird clubs. Overall, about 28 bird clubs have taken part in car counts. And as I mentioned, 50% of the counts are done by local farmers. And then the nature conservation agencies, people have been particularly helpful in initiating and coordinating routes in all the provinces that the project, the 7 provinces that the project takes part in. And then there are a number of other organizations that we collaborated with over the years. And I would like to give big thanks to all those who have allowed me to use their photos and to the team at the ADU. I really have appreciated their support, and I was very thankful when I was retrenched that Amoa McCarthy was able to take over coordinating the CAR project until it was 2018 when the ADU ran out of funding, and I was very thankful that the Percy Fitzpatrick Institute was able to continue. And as I've mentioned, the precinct organizers were amazing people, encouraging all the citizen scientists all along the way. And the CAR working group was very supportive. These are all the organizations who either gave of their time or funding to the ADU. And I'd like to extend a huge thank you to the Percy Fitzpatrick Institute of African Ornithology and Sanya Rose, who coordinated the project after Amoa, and to BirdLife and Tanya, who is the current coordinator of CAR, and to all the precinct organizers for all their efforts to keep CAR running into the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Donella. It's an amazing amount of work that was done, and I think Tanya mentioned in the chat, an amazing amount of work that you did before email to keep those keep all the participants informed and ready to do the counts. So thank you and well done on that. So now I think it is Christie up next. Christie, you're welcome to start sharing, and yeah, thanks very much.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, amazing to hear the history. I think I might have had the easy job just for analyzing the data. Great. Yeah, so as Christina mentioned earlier, I finished my PhD at the beginning of this year. And I'm going to be talking about some of the analysis that I did using the CAR data to look at blue crane population trends. So blue cranes are our most range-restricted crane species. They are near endemic to South Africa. They breed in the summer, and during the winter they are found congregating in flocks. So in terms of their red list status, at a global level, they're listed as vulnerable. At a regional level in South Africa, we're currently reviewing the red list status, but the last assessment in 2015 was near threatened. And then in Namibia, they are critically endangered. So we found 99% of our blue cranes within South Africa, and there's a very small isolated population around Etosha in Namibia. The counts have consistently been less than 50 for many years now. The counts are declining. So this population is in quite dire straits. Within South Africa, we talk about 3 different subpopulations. So in the Western Cape wheatlands, we find more than half of all of our blue cranes in the country. Historically, blue cranes would have been very rare or vagrant in the Western Cape area. And in the 1980s, it's estimated that only about 4% of blue cranes were found in the Western Cape. But as fynbos has been cleared for agriculture, blue cranes have taken advantage and have found the habitat quite favorable. And then currently found about 30 to 40% of South Africa's blue cranes in the Karoo, which is slightly lower than what we used to find back in the 1980s. There has been some declines in the Karoo, as we also picked up in the CAR data. And then the grasslands, we find about 10 to 15% of South Africa's blue cranes. The eastern grasslands was the former stronghold for the species, but there have been massive declines in the grasslands, which means that we now don't have as many in this area. So what is the concern? So one of the concerns is that blue cranes' reliance on this very transformed agricultural habitat makes them quite vulnerable. And the question that I look to answer with my PhD is this population safe, or is it a ticking time bomb? So between 2019 and 2023, I did fieldwork and data analysis and wrote up my PhD, which was handed in Feb this year. So some of the threats that concern us within these transformed landscapes are power lines. Blue cranes are particularly susceptible to power line collision. As Donella mentioned, fence entanglements are an issue. Poisoning has seemingly made a bit of a resurgence in the Overberg. We've had a couple of reports through the Overberg crane group of blue crane poisonings. With very intensive agriculture, there is also some nest disturbance and loss of chicks, in chicks drowning in water troughs. Baling twine causes some injuries. We're picking up some leg issues, particularly in the Swartland. We're not sure what the issues, what is the cause of this issue. We generally see it in juvenile birds, And we are wondering whether it's something to do with nutrition, but at this stage, we're not sure what is causing it. Crop damage, so particularly on sweet lupin in the Swartland area, but also in the Karoo, where we get very big numbers of blue cranes on these pivot irrigated lucerne fields, and this can be a nuisance to farmers. Likewise, blue cranes at feedlots in very big numbers can also be an irritant. So, taking all of these factors into account, one of the first questions for my PhD was to assess the national trend. So how are blue cranes doing? What are the numbers looking like? What have the trends been looking like over the last 20 to 30 years? So at the African Crane Conservation Program within EWT, we have got monitoring data, but because we're a relatively small team, it's got fairly limited scope and duration. With the species that's distributed across the country, it's very difficult to monitor at that scale. One of the data sets that we do have, and we're very lucky to have had this long-term partnership with Ezemvelo and Eskom, who's funded some of the aerial surveys over the years. So in KZN, there's been a long-term aerial survey to census blue cranes, all 3 crane species. And from this, we can see that within KZN, blue crane numbers seem to be recovering, which is very promising. But outside of KZN, we don't have other long-term trend data sets, which is why CAR is such an important data set for blue cranes. So you see, if we overlay the CAR routes on the blue crane range, it's a very good overlap in terms of covering pretty much the whole distribution of blue cranes. So yeah, as Donella mentioned earlier, Sally Hofmeyer did her PhD handed in 2012. So one of her chapters, she looked at blue crane population trends, and she also looked at the reliability of the CAR project for different species in different areas. So what she found from this is that CAR routes are most reliable for non-flocking species. So for blue crane during the summer period, we would find that the counts are a bit more reliable. They're also more reliable for non-migrant species, which is the case for blue cranes, who are quite sedentary, and for abundant species. So for blue cranes in the Western Cape and Karoo, what I found in the data was that the CAR routes were quite the models were quite good, whereas in the grasslands, where they're rarer, the models weren't as good. So Sally analyzed the data up until 2010, but when I started my PhD, we had another 10 years of data. So I essentially used the same methods that Sally used for her PhD and included the last 10 years of data so that we could look over the entire CAR project. And yeah, Donella Young and James Harrison wrote this paper in 2020, looking at the Western Cape road counts. So yeah, we've had quite a few people look at the blue crane CAR counts, given that they're a really great data set for the species. So what did I find? So looking at the national level, so these are all of the precincts. I included from 2000 until 2019 because this was the period when most routes had data. Some of the routes only started after 1993, I think, was when the Overberg started, and then as time went on, more routes were added. So I'm not going to go into the statistics too much, but just to explain what we're looking at in this graph. So the open circles are indicating our raw data, which is the average cranes per kilometer. And then what the model ran something called a generalized additive model. And what the model does is it fits a trend line to that data to get essentially a trend overall. And then this blue area would be indicating the 95% confidence intervals. So for a very variable data set, these confidence intervals would be quite high and would be quite uncertain of the trend. And for quite a tight data points, these confidence intervals would be smaller. So nationally, we've seen a 24% increase over this time period, but you can see that the increasing trend turned around in about 2010, and since then we've seen a 19% decline. So then I looked by precinct. So for the Western Cape weaklands, we saw quite strong increases in the Overberg and Swartland up until around 2007, 2010. Thereafter, the Swartland seems to have leveled off. My thinking is that the Swartland is a bit of a drier area than the Overberg, and I think that in the Swartland, we've likely reached carrying capacity in terms of the number of blue cranes that can exist within that area. Whereas in the Overberg, we've seen a decline of 22%. And given that we find blue cranes at the highest density in the Overberg, this seems to be what's driving the national decline in terms of our total numbers. In the Karoo, I was only able to analyze up until about 2016, 2017, because there's been a bit of a drop off in participation, unfortunately, but it looks like we are seeing potentially some declines in the Karoo. For the Karoo, given that it's part of our blue crane stronghold, it's going to be really important that we get the car counts back up and running so we can get a good sense of what's happening with trends in the Karoo. And then in the grasslands, as I mentioned before, given that blue cranes are relatively rare in the grasslands, the models had quite a lot of uncertainty because there aren't many cranes counted. So in terms of a method for monitoring blue cranes in this area, it's not as useful as in the Karoo and the Western Cape. Some of the precincts gave us some interesting insights, but mostly the uncertainty was just too great to take away a strong trend. So in summary, we've seen significant recovery of blue crane numbers over the last 23 years, particularly in the grasslands, as well as numbers increasing in the Western Cape. But it is quite concerning that we're starting to see declines in the stronghold, being the Western Cape and the Karoo. So we are this year looking at finalizing our blue crane conservation planning process, from which we're going to develop a conservation plan and strategy. And in terms of the conservation plan, a big part of that is going to be monitoring. So this is where we are calling for people to get engaged with the process, with the CAR project, and to ensure that we do our CAR counts consistently for blue crane, particularly the summer counts are quite important, and also encourage others to do CAR counts so that we get good consistent participation. And lastly, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who's been involved with the CAR project, and of course everybody who's been collecting the data. It's an amazing data set to have, particularly for the blue crane. And then a big thank you to all of the funders that supported my PhD as well as the conservation planning process that we're busy with now. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Christie. And well done on your PhD. It looks really interesting and useful for the conservation of our national bird. So now on to Dr. Alan Lee.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. Really great to be here tonight, share a little bit about my experiences, and also to reassure the listeners tonight that I don't worship at the gates of Mordor, as Cassie might have implied. I was always more of a fan of Gandalf. And I know that people are quite scared of statistics sometimes, and I think that Christie has actually given a great job of how this data is being used. So I thought I'd give a little bit more of a personal perspective, my journey with the CAR project. And it started in 2011 when Donella approached me to do a count on the northern side of the Baviaanskloof Mountains in route number WU08, was the Lee family like to call it the Woohoo 8 thing, which might become clearer in the next few slides. And in 2011, these were the first photos I took of that route as we did our first summer count. So a lot of fantastic birds, beautiful scenery, transitioning from Renosterveld to Succulent Karoo, 44 kilometers of peace, tranquility, and dusty roads. In 2012, I did it again by bicycle in preparation for a big cycle survey across the Fynbos biome, and left the winter count to my dad. And in 2013, I repeated it again, and I became aware of another problem that was occurring in this particular region, which was the proliferation of electric fences to keep out pest species from the sheep, the Angora goats and things, which are our main livelihood stream in this particular region. And this was causing devastating impacts on the tortoises. So in the slide I'm showing now, we had up to 4 or 5 tortoises within 100 meters dead on these electric fences. And a spin-off project from this was that we had a master's student come out from the Fitzpatrick Institute, Matt McRae, who did a project to demonstrate the impact of these this anti-predator measure on tortoises. So not bird related, but conservation outcome from that. The first time I was brave enough to bring my family on the car route was in 2016. That's my daughter Eleanor filling out her own form, and son Charlie, about 3 to 4 years old in this case here. She's not actually filling out the form, but in order to prep her for the route, I gave her a sheet of 22 blocks and said that each time we stop every 2 kilometers, you have to put an X in a box, prepping her for data entry for the years to come. So fast forward to our summer count in this year, all the family out counting again. Birds look the same. We're all looking a little bit more different. One thing that we do have in common, though, is that Eleanor still likes to count the birds from the top of the car rather than from inside. Now on to the sciencey bits. Cassie's already given an introduction to our famous citizen science projects, models for how to monitor birds across the world, really. Models that are being adopted across Africa. SABAP 2, well known to most members of the audiences here, is a showcase of a fantastic citizen science project. But most of the data that's collected is in binary format. So the species is recorded or it isn't recorded. Although now with BirdLife, you can give actual counts pertaining to your particular sighting, and that species, that data is accessible to BirdLife South Africa through the threatened species cause that you can sign up to. So this is where projects like Quack and CAR are super useful. So Quack it was initiated in 1992. It has a similar format to CAR, as in it's counted on twice per year, summer and winter. And the aim is to really count up the number of birds which are being seen here. So the Quack project was used as a showcase by a consortium of academics and conservation NGOs in order to get that data into an accessible format for managers, conservationists, or the members of the public, in a project that was called Birdie. the biodiversity data pipeline. This was led by SANBI and the SEEK department at the University of Cape Town, together with other role players. And what they did was they used the state-of-the-art modeling technique, state-space modeling, in order to look at counts during the summer and the winter and infer population trends based on local environmental conditions. And they did that also using dynamic occupancy models for SABAP2 data. So you're able to see where birds should be from year to year based on environmental conditions. It was a big project. There was some very intelligent, clever people working on the modeling. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that this is where CAR could go as well, if there's funding to do so in the future. But in the meantime, we need to be collecting the data so that these sorts of models can be run. And the reason that many of us are here tonight is because the CAR project is one of the ones that is lagging behind in terms of contributions now. Charts on the screen here are the contributions of full protocol cards to the SABAP2 project, the blue and red chart. The blue period was before the advent of BirdLife, and then the red period from 2015 onwards is the number of contributions that we get to SABAP2 in terms of full protocol cards measured in thousands, which has got good momentum behind it. So the influence of the app there is quite noticeable on participation, but also there are many champions behind that project, Aaron Strateer for BirdLife South Africa being one of them. By contrast, once the ADU folded, the number of participants in that project declined rapidly. So there was no dedicated feedback, the newsletters fell behind, and we can see that interest waned there quite dramatically. Christie has spoken quite a bit about uncertainty in terms of the models for certain regions, specifically the Karoo, and this is as a result, unfortunately, of the decline in participation in these projects. So I know that a lot of you, possibly who were involved in CAR, have been on holiday, so time to get back to work and start collecting data, because it's important. My main day-to-day activity at the moment, desktop job, is to analyze data to inform the red listing process. It's been referred to by a couple of our presenters tonight. And there's a good reason to be concerned about the status of many birds, and many of these birds are monitored through the CAR project, as well as the other citizen science projects. Humans might have something to do with it. And CAR is a very important source of evidence, primary evidence in the case of blue cranes, for instance, or supportive evidence in the case of species which are perhaps more widespread, covered by other databases, where we can compare trends in those databases to what the CAR database has to say. So an example of a species that is not in decline, at least here in the Western Cape, would be the helmeted guinea fowl. So a big fan of the Rainbow Nation. Our colorful squiggles over here are all the different precincts that Donella has referred to, and each of those may have different trends upon them. And if we look overall for the species, we can see with the black line here that it's going up. In other words, we're getting more birds counted per kilometer over the course of the project, at least over those 20 years. Last year, a team led by Melissa Whitecross, Linda van der Heer, and other colleagues at BirdLife South Africa they'd been monitoring nests and been doing on-foot surveys. We also use SABAP data in order to show that black stork is a species that is in decline and has now, unfortunately, slipped below the threshold from vulnerable to endangered. And looking at CAR data, which we didn't do for this actual publication, we can see a supportive trend over here. This is a very rare bird. So birds per kilometer, close to 0.2. So you need to be traveling, 500 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers in order to see a black stork on a CAR survey. It's not all doom and gloom, though. A conservation success story for South Africa is the southern bald ibis. Again, a publication where we looked at colony count data as well as SABAP2 data, and we found that the species is at least stable, if not increasing. And this, again, is reflected in the CAR data. So the CAR data is very supportive of trends that we are seeing through other projects. species that we haven't yet turned to. So one of these is the blue crane. It was the only species on Donella's slide which was listed as least concerned. Unfortunately, since the 2015 Red Data Book came out, it has now been globally assessed as near threatened, and we can see from the CAR data that is in fact in decline, and that status will almost certainly be reflected in the next edition of the Red Data Book, the regional one. Ludwig's busted, Jessica Shaw, another project that looked at the species in great detail, showed that collisions with power line infrastructure were at a greater rate than breeding. So a species in decline, listed as endangered as a consequence. So mortality greater than recovery for this particular species. So in a nutshell, CAR is a great project, provides you really useful count data that is supportive of other sources of data or the primary source of data, and we need that data to go on being collected so that we can inform the conservation status of our species going forward into the future. With that, I'd like to thank you for participating and for listening. Encourage you to get out there, join with the citizen science projects. They all provide valuable data. And also thank you to my supporters that support my position at BirdLife South Africa. With that, back to Cassie and the studio.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much for the dark magic. I still think it's dark magic, despite what you say. Right, I will end us off quickly by just pointing us into the future. You all probably have a lot of questions of how to get involved now, but we've got some wonderful news for you. We haven't really thought extreme long term yet. We'll get there, but short, medium term, we are trying to form or we have already formed a new working group that will invigorate this wonderful ornithological citizen science project. It consists of a few members from all the various institutes that you heard from today, and we hope to pick up where everything stopped when the animal demographic unit closed down a number of years ago. So watch this space. We'll work hard. The biggest news, and especially for those who have done CAR before, the website unfortunately was very user-friendly. And entering the data especially was something that was a very, very tedious task. So Michael Brooks, the big technician behind the scenes at the University of Cape Town, has been working on a new website. And as some people have already asked in the chat, will there be something regarding birdlasser? Well, we hope to eventually link the coordinated avifaunal road counts to a app of some kind. We are not 100% sure yet on how we will do that. This is still a work in progress, but a little bit light at the end of the tunnel for those who have struggled with the website. So yes, wonderful. Right, pull out your calendar and earmark those two dates, please. The 27th and the 28th of July of this coming year, the year of the Bottelier. So if you haven't taken part in a CAR yet, this will be your first opportunity. If you're a member of a bird club, well, it's quite easy. Reach out, ask if someone is already doing it, and get involved. If someone isn't doing it, well, reach out and ask if there are routes in your area that used to be done. Find a couple of friends, download all the instructions that are available on the website, and familiarize yourself with the methods. Do read through it a couple of times, maybe ask a few people that are talking here tonight to give you some advice, and then do go out and do some birding. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience to do birding by CAR, for CAR, and we will really appreciate the data. You've already heard how important it is to all of our work that we are doing. If you're not a member of a bird club, I can encourage you to become one, please. All the information is available on BirdLife South Africa's website, but if you want to reach out to the SABAP coordinator, Tanya Anderson, she might just point you in the right direction. So you can ask her whether there are any routes in your area that you can do, and then follow the same thing. Find some friends, download the information, get to know the methods, and go out and do some birding. That's all you need to do. that's how the website looks. So if you find that, it doesn't look like the previous one I showed you. That's the one in progress. This is the one that you'll be looking for, and you'll notice, as with most websites, on the left-hand side, that's where you'll find all the information under the Downloads tab. So all the forms you need to fill in, and then all the instructions. And when you're eventually done, you enter all the data here as well. So yes, go have a look. That's the website, car.birdmap.africa. If you do want to take part, we can absolutely encourage you to do so. So thank you very much for spending time this evening with us. We hope you learned a few new things about one of the projects that we wish to pump some new blood into, light the fire again, and get this awesome project going. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much to Donella, to Christie, and to Alan for all their help. And of course, to Christina, as always, for hosting these wonderful programs. Have a wonderful evening. We are available to answer some questions if you would like to ask them. That's it. Thank you, Christina.
Great. Thanks very much, Cassie. And thanks very much to Donella, Christie, and Alan as well for your contributions to tonight's webinar. I think it was a lovely overview of the CAR project, and I hope it's got some people excited to contribute. So we do have a couple of questions, so I will start those out. So a couple of people, Penny Abbott and John Horrocks, have both asked similar questions, saying it looks like protected areas such as Kruger are not included in CAR, and asking if there's any way sandparks can be involved through citizen visits or honorary ranger groups. I'm not sure who would be best placed to answer that, but if someone does have an answer, that would be great. I don't know. Donella, if you know sort of the way the routes were initially set up and why Kruger wouldn't have been involved?
I think they were initially set up to monitor all the big birds on farms, and to particularly involve farmers. So there was an ongoing concern for the birds, and that the reserves, the birds were protected.
Okay, I guess, yeah, that makes sense. In the history of it, I wonder if there would be scope to expand and add some routes in reserves now. Might get more people doing them as they go there anyway. That might be something to consider. Colleen Smith says she has all the original information documents on CAR. Is there any new information or documents that she can access to give birders for the count at the end of the month? I assume that's just a matter of going to the website and downloading them. Cassie, I don't know if you want to answer that.
That one. Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Colleen. Yes, there's nothing really new that you can find online. If you've got the original documents, that's the ones that you need to use. The only one that I can encourage you to maybe consider doing is the document that describes the specific route that you are driving. Part of our long-term project is to just have a look at each one of the routes and see if they're still viable. Most of them haven't been driven for many, many years, and might now be maize fields or residential areas. So they might be completely unusable for future surveys. So that's the only one that might not necessarily have been on your radar, but do consider adding that into your list, just a quick description on what you found for the route, and submit that. That'll be wonderful. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Cassie. And I see Kevin Shaw has written in the chat about the reserves, the Kruger question, saying that the idea was to monitor birds off reserves then rather than on reserves where monitoring was already taking place. So thanks for that, Kevin. I see, Cassie, you have marked the question by Shashi, asking about any backyard bird counts, in whether there are any backyard bird counts in South Africa. So Cassie, you can take that away.
For those of you who are now frowning, what on earth is a backyard bird count? Besides you counting birds in your background, it is a big project that is done, especially in the United States of America, through eBird, so the Ornithological Institute on that side, the Cornell lab, they do this annual backyard bird count. In South Africa, there's nothing official similar to that, Sashi. The best we have is sometimes the local clubs have got something. I know that the club that I belong to here in Durban last year was it this year? I can't remember which one now, like time flies. There's like birding in my backyard was the theme of the year, and people were encouraged to report on birds in their backyards. So nothing similar really.
I guess there is the Birding Big Day, which has
That's the closest you get.
the sort of 5-kilometer radius. Then Wilhelmina asks whether there's a car Facebook or Instagram site. I don't know, Tanya, if you want to answer that. I know there's quite an active SABAP Facebook group, but is there anything specifically for car?
No, unfortunately, we don't have a car Facebook or Instagram site at this stage, but maybe eventually we could get one.
Yeah, or maybe the SABAP site would be SABAP Facebook page would be a kind of good start to get people excited and chatting about things.
Yes, yeah. People could always post their stuff about car on the SABAP Facebook site. That would be great. There is a quack site, I know, and often the quack counts are posted. People report back on the quack counts, which was interesting, and photographs. So it would be wonderful actually to have some of the car counts posted on the SABAP site as well. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, that would be great. There was a question in the chat that I just wanted to get to. It was from Michael Rampedi.
Werner has just posted a link to there's a Facebook group, car group.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Could just get more busy.
Okay, great.
Werner,
So yeah,
thanks for posting
you
that.
can go look into the chat for that Facebook group. So there was another question in the chat from Michael Rampedi asking about the timing of the counts and why the end of January and the end of July were chosen. I'm not sure, Donella or Alan, if you have any insights into that.
I think the quack counts had started before the car counts, and I think it was following on that. I think the only difference is that we do try and have all the car counts on the last Saturday of January and July. But I think it was to pick up any differences, due to the season.
Okay, thanks for that. I see there's another question from Wilhelmina asking, do you use information from iNaturalist? Cassie, if you want to take that one.
I'll tackle that one since I've recently dug into that a little bit. iNaturalist, Wilhelmina, no. For the South African Bird Atlas Project, no, we don't use that. But there are individuals, and I know Alan will nod in agreement, that do use it for habitat suitability modeling. It's just another database that you can access in order to find point data or distribution data for species. So it can be either for plants, since plants, birds, insects, you name it, since it's a lot more diverse. But for birds specifically in South Africa, we rarely use it in the context, unless Alan will now climb in and tell me that he's used it extensively in the Red Data Book. I don't think it plays that big a role.
Thanks, Cassie. Generally, there are better data sets for birds, so BirdLife South Africa. We have used iNaturalist. So actually, I featured the photos of the blue coron and Ludwig's bustard, thanks to contributors on iNaturalist. I do visit there quite often, and we did use spatial records or GPS records in some of our models for species distribution modeling, but it tends to be biased towards very colorful, charismatic, and birds that you can take photos of. So smaller skulkers species that aren't very charismatic or easier to identify by photos are very poorly represented by our naturalists. So we do prefer the SABAP and other data submission pathways to get overall pictures of bird life. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Alan. Then Christian in the chat says, who do we email to find out what routes have not been done in recent time? On the website, it lists Michael Brooks. Is that the correct person, or should it be someone else?
The quick answer is most of them have not been done. The long answer is reach out to your local bird club if you are a member. There must be people doing it. If not, then do get in contact with Tanya at SABAP. She might be able to point you in the right direction. So Tanya, apologies in advance for the flood of emails that will come your way, but I think that'll be a good sign instead of too much work. So yes, thank you very much for that one, Christian. There was one, I think, just after that, our routes being updated based on new land use by Sandra Hedges. Sandra, we will start working on that. We've only recently, and I do mean recently, within the last 2 weeks, had the first working group meeting. So we will eventually review everything. It's still a big project that we will need to get going and just find our feet first. So for now, just keep whacking away at the old methods, and we'll eventually see what we can provide you that's bright and new and shiny.
Great, thanks for that, Cassie. And Tanya, if you don't mind, maybe you could just put your email address in the chat for people to copy over. I think we will leave it there. It's now almost 8:20, and I think we will leave it there for tonight. Unless there's anything else anyone would like to mention specifically. No. Well, there is one message in the chat from Bradley who says, well, firstly, well done, everyone, and provides an endorsement for the car project, saying it's a lot of fun and it's possible to have a good reason to get out and bird. And Bradley's been lucky to have some pretty routes, which also makes it more enjoyable, and saying, don't forget the picnic snacks as well. That seems to be quite an important part of the process. So yeah, I hope that this webinar has inspired some more people to get involved and reinvigorate those routes that haven't been done in a little while. So yeah, if you are interested, please do get involved. And in our post-webinar survey, there is an option to leave your email address, and more information can be sent to you. So yeah, thank you very much to all of our speakers this evening. And I would just like to remind everyone that we will be back in 2 weeks' time, and Tanya will be back with us, and this time presenting on the SABAP 2 project. So if you are interested in that, or want to learn more about it and get involved in the very worthwhile Bird Atlas project, please do join us in 2 weeks' time. And with that, yeah, thank you again to our viewers for watching this evening, and to our presenters. And with that, I will let you all go. Thank you very much, and good night.